Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 11. Man, boy howdy, I tell you what, it really doesn't seem like we are 11 episodes in already. We are officially launching coming up here. Just so you know, folks, this is a pre-recorded episode. I know that the intro said that, but I want you to know that I am there in the chat right now. I'm with you. I'm there to answer questions. We're going to be having a great evening of conversation tonight with Stephen Myers from the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, discussing some of the technologies he talks about in his books, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, as well as the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. What was the Great Pyramid actually for? Quite obviously not a tomb. If it was a tomb, as we've said with Stephen numerous times, that dude was intended to go nowhere in the afterlife. And we'll be getting into that. We'll be getting into the things that are odd about the Great Pyramid that don't necessarily add up the way that traditional Egyptology would say. Is it aliens? Stephen has a very strong opinion about that. We'll be getting into things like the Orion correlation theory, all that kind of great stuff with Stephen Myers from the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. Thepump.org is his website. In the second part of the episode, after a commercial break, we will be talking with our good friend, Reverend Michael JS Carter, about UFOs in the Bible and are the biblical accounts of what might be UFOs perhaps something that, you know, frightens mainstream religion? Is it something that conflicts with mainstream religion? Is a reverend, is it something that he preaches from the pulpit? Is it something that he openly talks about from the pulpit? Things like that, you know, how man's experience with these paranormal phenomena have been going on for literally millennia, and what that does for our culture, what that means for our culture, and how to interpret some of these passages in the Bible, such as Ezekiel's wheels, Moses going on to Mount Sinai and coming down glowing, even the transfiguration of Christ we get into. So that's it in the second part with Reverend Michael JS Carter. First part, we'll be talking with Stephen Meyer. We'll be getting with him right after our news of the week here, folks. Make sure to stop on by Facebook, visit the Curious Realm group. That is where we post all of our news of the week. Some great articles coming in out of futurism. Geomagnetic storm kills 40 of SpaceX's Starlink satellites. That's bad news for a lot of folks out there, depending on that coming out. Out of ABC News, flight attendants outraged at Southwest's decision to resume alcohol sales. I'm not outraged. Kind of miss my gin and tonic when I'm flying. In addition to that, out of Daily Mail, .uk is Britain's artificial sun nuclear fusion reactor has set a new world record. And defensenews.com, Black Hawk helicopter flies uninhabited for its first time. That is just some of the news of the week there on our Curious Realm Facebook group, folks. That is just wild stuff. Go watch the video of the unmanned Black Hawk helicopter. This is not like a Black Hawk helicopter that they built with this intention. This is a Black Hawk helicopter that they have adapted to run without pilot. So absolutely amazing technology being used out there. While you are online checking all that out, of course, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is the website. You can stop on by CuriousRealm.com /store to check out all the great merch that we have, everything from tumblers and like, we even got baby bibs. We got Bluetooth speakers. We got stickers and notebooks and all kinds of stuff. In addition to that, we have a whole section of scientific materials down at the bottom where you can get ghost hunting materials, paranormal, investigative gear like Geiger counters and the like. Tons of guest books, as well as these books right here that I am holding in my hand. Our books from our guest today, Stephen Myers. Welcome back to the show. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. I have always loved our conversations from back in the day. I love how I say back in the day, like it wasn't like 2.5 months ago that we were dudes and beer.
Yes.
Yeah, way in the Wayback Machine when we were dudes and beer, you know. But it was always great to have people like you see through the veil of that name into the actual content and the guest list and the topics that we talked about, and to be able to bring you on and expose this knowledge and these hypotheses that you have about the construction of the Great Pyramid to our audience. I can't thank you enough. So thank you for always coming on, Stephen.
Well, I appreciate it. Having me return as a guest is a tremendous compliment, so I appreciate it.
Well, like I said, way early in our relationship, again and again and again. I can't wait to have you on that many times. So, welcome back. Let's kind of reintroduce our new audience since we have grown. Let's reintroduce them to the idea of the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, how it is that you came into this realm of research, Stephen, and what the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation is all about.
Well, it's a nonprofit foundation founded here in the United States, a 501c3 organization dedicated to understanding how and why the Great Pyramid was built. And the focus of our research is that the Great Pyramid was infrastructure that actually helped the people who built it, instead of just being a big pile of rocks that didn't really protect the pharaoh's body or anything like that.
Yeah.
But that the Great Pyramid was a functioning machine, and it was built using water locks level by level, and that the purpose of that huge infrastructure, that expensive building, was to provide prosperity for those who built it by being a water pump.
And it's a really interesting concept, the idea of it being a water pump. And we'll get into some of the physics behind that here in a minute, because when you start looking at the typical slice diagram down the middle of just the classic illustration of the interior of the Great Pyramid, it's really interesting to look at it and see it as a single cycle engine. And really, really wild. So what was it that first brought this idea to your mind, Stephen? Because of course this is not necessarily adopted thinking by typical archaeology. It's not necessarily adopted thinking by mainstream Egyptology.
Well, it's not. Well, it's actually the genesis of the whole idea is from a researcher named Edward Kunkel, and he privately published a book called Pharaoh's Pump. And I read that book and was fascinated by it. And he talks about the Great Pyramid being assembled using water locks and barges, that the Great Pyramid had a huge return on investment, and that it helped people in a tangible way, that the Great Pyramid turned the desert into a garden, and that the Great Pyramid turned toil into leisure. And so we built on that book. It was originally published in 1962. And ultimately, to honor him, started a nonprofit foundation with the title of his book in the name of the foundation. So that's how I got started, and then went on and wrote several books and produced some documentaries, traveled to Egypt, and it went on from there.
And I love the fact that you were so inspired by somebody else's work that you picked it up and carried it on.
I did. It was privately published. He had it printed up in a print shop, and it doesn't have all the high production values of books we read today, but it sure has a lot of information in it. And it's, again, out of print, but you can get that book through interlibrary loan and read it yourself. So it was a fascinating book, and much better than what Egyptologists have come up with. The idea, they say, the precision stone cutting was accomplished using hand tools, but they can't provide a demonstration for that. So, and they say, big heavy stones, 70 tons, which is the weight of a locomotive. Strong-backed workers just drug that up a ramp. Well, Egyptologists have never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch.
Yeah.
So,
and every few years you'll hear about a group from like National Geographic or something like that tries to reconstruct the pyramid on scale in a scale amount of time.
You do.
And I've yet to see one where it has been completed.
No, there's a lot of disinformation out there. They use relatively small stones, like 1-ton stones.
Oh yeah, it's all scaled down.
Yeah,
like the whole thing.
I tell people, I can pick up a full-size car. Sure. Just with my hands, just pick it up like a F-150 pickup. I can go out and pick one up. That's that. But I'll demonstrate it by picking up a Hot Wheels car. Yeah. It's disinformation, and it's very. I don't know how they get away with it, Egyptology, but sciences, they come and they go, and they usually go when they are based on flawed research methods. And Egyptology doesn't use the scientific method. Neither did phrenology. Phrenology, they just made up, this part of these bumps on the heads have to do with this character trait. Well, it couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method, and it went away.
Palmistry, the same thing.
Yes, palmistry. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. But that's where Egyptology is right now.
Well, and it's interesting because I follow a couple of Egyptologists on Facebook, things like that. I love their work. I love reading their work. Their shows are fantastic. And there's even an archaeologist here at the University of Texas that deals in South American archaeology, specifically Mayan and mound builders and things like that here in America.
Yes. And
I love hearing these things. I love reading these things. But the one thing that always crosses my mind is, like we discussed last week with Craig Woolheater, the idea of are you willing and ready to possibly throw out what you know to be true as an archaeologist if you find something to the contrary? Are you willing to do that? Will it scientifically for you take a corpse to investigate whether or not this creature is real? What will it take for Egyptology as we know it and archaeology as we know it to explore the lock concept with just as much rigor as they do the ramp or the curved ramp theory?
Right. Well, Egyptology has essentially stagnated, and it's in effect the same as it was 100 years ago, the only science that is not advancing, and they won't. They become a priesthood where they tell students in school, high school or college, the same stories until they graduate to become Egyptologists. So, no, they won't. I produced a video on my YouTube channel about Egyptology being a pseudoscience, and it's certainly generated a lot of interest about their research methods and the results of their flawed research methods.
Well, it's interesting because Granted, there are many people that poo-poo your theory as well. You know, from the opposite side, there are even people within the community that from the opposite side, from like the ancient alien camp and things, that look at your work and go, "What are you talking about?" When at the same time, it's like there is a lot more proof to prove this than there is, even for the fact that, you know, they built the pyramids to mimic Orion.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about studying ancient structures is that there is a constant, and that constant is humans. It's difficult to say, oh, humans did this, you know, especially in agrarian society. They made precision stone cutting, large-scale precision stone cutting, like the casing stones of the Great Pyramid. But in modern times, there's still humans. We have that same feature, that same constant, but now we can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's just very, I just don't know how they can get away with that. You know, it's like saying, well, in the past, cows jumped over the moon. Okay. You know, that's part of what we believe is cows jump over the moon. But now we can't really demonstrate that. Yeah. But cows are the same. And that's where Egyptology is right now.
Yeah.
It's strange. And they taught about the Piltdown skull, you know, for a whole generation in colleges. Oh, yeah, they wrote their doctoral thesis on the Piltdown skull, but the experts, the best experts in the world, couldn't see the file marks on it. And it took a whole generation for the Piltdown skull to be deemed a fraud, not because anyone changed their minds. It's because the people at first researched the Piltdown skull, those anthropologists, those experts had to die off, never changing their mind. And the next generation of anthropologists said, oh, the Piltdown skull's a hoax, but never changed their mind. So we're just waiting for Egyptologists to die off. And that's what's going on right now. I don't know anyone past the 8th grade who thinks that extremely precise stone cutting was accomplished using hand tools. It's just, and then there's certainly other flaws in their research, you know, their sequence of pyramid construction and a few other things, their interpretation of hieroglyphics, and their steadfast refusal to even look at anything that's different than what they say. So it's a precarious position to become an Egyptologist these days, I think.
Yeah, and I've got part of the video that you made, the first video about the lock system and how it was possibly created. Let's start getting into some of the evidence that is around the Giza plain that points to this hypothesis.
Well, there's certainly a profound link between water and the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau. Water erosion and huge boats, the sun barges that were entombed, if you want to use that word, right next to the base of the Great Pyramid. We think those large boats were associated with the construction of the Great Pyramid. There's other boat pits on the Great Pyramid area on the Giza Plateau. The casing stones were cemented together, watertight, with a bonding agent, very strong. So Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. There was an enclosure wall around the Great Pyramid that we think impounded water. Flanders Petrie found sediment inside the Great Pyramid, and that's water related. So, geez, there's a whole host of types of evidence that indicate water and the Great Pyramid have a profound relationship.
Yeah, and there's even quite a bit of evidence to show flooding up around the base of the Sphinx.
Yes.
Quite a bit of water. And I mean, like beyond the water erosion from occasional rainfall that you would get in the area, to the point that It's like, where did all this water erosion come from?
Right. There's water erosion, and also they found a harbor right near the Great Pyramid. So you can word search on the internet, Great Pyramid and harbor, and find a whole bunch of information about that. So, people say, well, it's real dry there. Well, things change over the years and, over the eons. And we think that there was certainly the original builders were geniuses and were able to provide water at the construction site. Other researchers contend that same thing. Even Christopher Dunn, who wrote the Giza power plant, he says that water was associated with the Great Pyramid and even entered the descending passage inside the Great Pyramid. So it's not just myself. It's other researchers as well.
Yeah, and there's numerous things that show salt deposits along the walls of the chambers.
Yes, I forgot to mention that, the salts.
Yeah.
And that's also water related. Some say, oh, that's from the moisture from the breath of people that have visited the Great Pyramid.
That's a lot of salt from moisture.
Yeah, so, but we think that it's water related. There is water inside, even up in the Queen's chamber, King's chamber. So it's interesting.
Well, and even if you were to go into, because of course, part of the theory of the whole pyramid power plant is the fact that the pyramid was used as an separator for hydrogen and oxygen.
That's part of Christopher Dunn's idea, and but myself, I think that it was to pump water.
Yeah,
and so it's just, but we both think that the Great Pyramid was built by geniuses.
Absolutely.
That it was a infrastructure, that it was a building that actually did something, and that it helped the builders, instead of the idea that the Great Pyramid was a very ineffectual tomb that didn't work. You ask people that believe it's a tomb, ask them, well, how do long open passages that have sliding stones and doors on pivots, how does that protect the Pharaoh's mummy? And no coherent answer is provided.
And I've actually got a slideshow of images up right now. I'm going to, I didn't want to stop that. Sorry about that, folks. I wanted to play that through and show that image right there where you were actively in the sarcophagus.
Me laying in the sarcophagus?
Yeah. And there's something very important to note here, folks, and that is the smooth granite walls. Even the sarcophagus itself, the fact that there is no engraving, there are no cartouches, there are zero hieroglyphics, zero passages from the Book of the Dead. These were all things that were done in a common person's tomb. You would have at least had things written down. You would have found some Ushapti jars with innards, so that you could find them in the afterlife and become whole. There were so many things that were ritualistically necessary for a proper burial in ancient Egypt, none of which are obeyed.
Yes.
With that quote tomb. So once again, like I said in the show intro, if the Great Pyramid was intended as a tomb, the one sarcophagal chamber, whoever was buried in it, their intent was for this monument to hold him and him never, ever, ever leave. He was never intended to go to the afterlife and be happy in the netherworld. Go see Thoth and all that stuff. Like, ain't happening, buddy.
Yeah, there's no hieroglyphics, no writing. Other places, like on temples and actual tombs in the Valley of the Kings, everything is written on. They wrote stuff on everything. They wanted to tell you, but the Great Pyramid is a machine. Just like the inside of your car engine in the cylinders and pistons You might see a part number, but they don't have anything written down to tell you something because it's a machine. That's not what it does.
It's a part of a greater whole.
Right. Well, a hydroelectric dam in all the passages and chambers, they don't have like hieroglyphs or a bunch of stuff written on it because it's a machine. It don't do that.
Yeah.
It's a functional thing.
Well, and that's a really interesting and salient point to bring up right there, Stephen, is the fact of there's a show on Discovery Channel, I think, called After Humans.
Yes.
And it shows like literally like, here's Detroit, humanity ends. And it's already pretty much there, sadly, Detroit. But there's a prime example of like, go look at a city that has been sitting there for as long as it has in states of disrepair, and look at how fast the buildings crumble. Look at how fast they go away. Now, if we didn't know that was Detroit and what was previously there before Detroit went down, if we didn't have that record, what would we know about that dilapidated building in 50 years?
Right. Yeah.
What would we know about that dilapidated building in 100 years, 300 years, 1,000 years? What would it be? What was its use? What was its purpose? Like, we're onto a technology in 1,000 years that no longer uses Tesla technology like we're used to. So what's a power station? What the hell are you talking about, dude? What the hell's a hydroelectric power dam?
Right.
Like,
you
restrained Mother Nature to get power instead of just getting it freely from the air? What kind of monsters were you?
Can you imagine? But imagine this. 10,000 years from now, when all the hydroelectric dams are not functioning and the rivers have changed their course, people will study those dams and say, oh, look, they have passages that point to stars. Yeah. They're symbolically telling us something. Or they might find a body that was entombed in the cement when the dam was built. And a lot of times they wear those tin hard hats that look like the sun, if you will. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, oh, that's why they built this building. You can see it right there. It's a tomb because this guy was buried in the concrete.
Yeah. I guess that's what a few like sports stadiums will be too,
Oh yeah,
they find bones in them from like people like, wow, this Golden Gate Bridge must have been a monument to the dead. Look at all the skeletons that are inside of it.
Yeah, or the towers point to a star.
Yeah.
And then, oh man, it's horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing with, Hoover Dam, as many people are buried in the concrete that fell during the construction. And, obviously this is a temple to the river god of death.
I've been there.
Like would that be the logic that follows?
Yeah, that's the way. I mean, you can, and a lot of that is based on some pretty poor research methods, coming up with correlations that don't have causation and a whole host of other things. But we think the Great Pyramid actually helped people, and that's a revolutionary idea.
Well, and let's start getting into that real quick about the internal construction, what it did, how it was a pump, and how that helped the people. Because, I mean, you, of course, get into that much more in the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, as well as Great Pyramid Water Pump. But let's start getting into that a little bit.
Well, we think that the subterranean chamber and associated cuttings into the solid bedrock were a type of water pump, and we think that the design of the subterranean chamber, with on the one end, the far end, has some unusual mounds that some people say was unfinished. We think those serve a purpose of a water break, if you will, and water comes in from the descending passage on the other end of the chamber, and it causes a massive, powerful whirlpool, and it uses the force of implosion described by Victor Schauberger, a Austrian naturalist from the 40s and 50s who did a lot of research in water flow and that type of thing. But we think the force of implosion was used to pump water up to up through the grotto and to the bottom end of the Grand Gallery. And that pump was also used to supply water for the water locks. So, and then the rest of the chambers in the Great Pyramid structure were also a water pump. It was like 2 water pumps in sequence. And the Grand Gallery, they separated hydrogen and oxygen and ignited those gases, which ultimately created a vacuum, which drew the water up the Grand Gallery. And then they were able to release that vacuum above that water, and that was like a 300-ton water piston moving down, pushing water into the Queen's chamber, which the top half had air, so it was half filled with air and water, which compressed that air to a high pressure, and that water pressure ultimately moved water up to the King's chamber and then out the King's chamber vents. That's a very abbreviated explanation, but my second book and second documentary describe that in excruciating detail.
Well, and what's great is the excruciating detail, honestly, because like we said in your last visit, it's like it was a water cylinder single engine pump. Single cycle engine, where, like you said, all you had to do was ignite the hydrogen and oxygen that's being separated. And once again, you can do that through numerous processes, folks. You do not need electrolysis for that. Mm-hmm. You can do that with chemical processes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You can do that. You can do that with metal alloys and naturally occurring sulfuric acid.
Yes.
All kinds of things. And it's interesting to know that the salts that are found in the Great Pyramid are very alkyl in their composition, like more so than like typical saltwater salt.
Yes.
And
yeah, it's interesting. A lot of chemical processes occurred inside the Great Pyramid.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, really interesting, especially if you look once again at that image of you. If you think about that, that would have been a perfect cistern in which to hold the chemical bath that you would create hydrogen with. I mean, and
about the coffer, and
precisely.
I think it was part of the machine, and we think that it might have been even a float for water to. To operate valves automatically, kind of like a toilet.
Yeah.
So there's a whole host of evidence that indicates that it was much more a machine than an ineffective tomb.
Yeah. And once again, not really something that mainstream archaeology is. I guess that they are aware of the theories, because of course the Giza power plant concept has been around for a long, long time.
It has.
As well as the pump concept. When did that come out? That was 80s, correct?
Edward Cockle originally did a lot of lectures in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, wow. Was it that far back?
Yeah. And his book was first published in 1962, so it's been a while, but it was privately published, and it doesn't have the slick production values and all of that, so it didn't get the exposure, let's say, that the Giza power plant did, as published mainstream book publisher. But, we're in the information age, and you can get all of that stuff, that book, my book from Amazon, our links for my DVDs are in my website at thepump.org. So, but you can find out about it. But it takes a long time. It takes 40 years to see the file marks on the Piltdown skull. And truth prevails, that type of thing. So, We're in it for the long haul.
Well, and you kind of have to be. You can't be invested in something like this part-time.
No.
You can't be invested in something like this half-heartedly. And I think that the one thing that separates you from a lot of researchers into things like this, Stephen, is the fact that you welcome challenges. You welcome challenges to the data that you have, to the hypothesis that you have.
Mm-hmm. I sure like it if people would read the books instead of just coming up with some misconception that they have and then debunk their misconception and think it has anything to do with me or my research. So, but yeah, I do invite people to talk about the research, ask questions, that type of thing, and it's fun, my favorite subject to talk about. I know the Orion correlation theory, they don't like it when you ask about their research methods or how they come up with their ideas.
And that is a widely accepted hypothesis. And once again, folks, it's a theory. Kind of like the theory. I remind people all the time. Yeah, theory of evolution. Don't forget that first part. Theory.
Yeah.
Still a working theory, still yet to be proven fully scientifically, but it is accepted as science because, we're like 70% there. And because we're 70% there, that is what is taught. That is what is accepted. The question is, when faced with something that goes against that 70%, are you A, willing to investigate science? B, are you willing to accept that your theorem may have been proved wrong? And it really does go down to the heart of that Einsteinian quote of, we look at our own work. When we find fault in our own work, we are a mimosa. When we find fault in our colleagues' work, we're a lion.
It's a good way to put it.
It's the fact of we soft hand problems with our work, but we're going to be really heavy handed if we prove something wrong about that dude's work.
Well, that's true. I know there were the idea that there were biblical correlations with the Great Pyramid and all religious stuff with the pyramid inch and predicting the birthplace of Jesus and Bible prophecy and all of that. And that was widely embraced theory, those correlations, but that's pretty much been rejected except by a few religious zealots. And now we have the Orion correlation theory, which kind of uses the same flawed research methods,
a little bit,
and coming up with all of these correlations. And it's
well, and my thing is once again just saying that it is. Now the fact is, yes, it is. It looks that way. Cool. But until you prove the fact that it was planned to be such, that is exactly what it was and what it was for, you can't say it is.
That's what I think.
It could be. And I think that's my problem. Even whenever you go into, that's why I love having people like Jared Murphy on who wrote, "It's not aliens, worse, it's us."
Yeah.
Much like we've said with you numerous times on the show here, Stephen, to discount the ingenuity is to discount ourselves and where we're at right now.
Well, yeah. And we've said this before. Ask an ancient alien person, the people that believe that, if ancient people were not smart enough to build the Great Pyramid. Yeah. And they'll start backpedaling. They were smart enough, but they had to have help from somewhere else. Well, it's either or. And I'm not an ancient alien. I'm an ancient genius. I believe in ancient geniuses.
And that's just it. I ascribe to a lot of thought forms. I am an open-minded individual. I read everything with an open mind, trying to read it like I read it for the first time. And I'm a fan of the show Ancient Aliens, and yeah, I will sit and I will conjecture, I will hearsay, I will have that conversation. I will have the conversation of, I don't know how they carved diorite. No idea how they carved a rock almost the surface strength of diamond. However, does that mean that they couldn't do it? Not necessarily. Like the ancient Egyptians had brain surgery too, you know?
Yeah, they did. Birth control, medicine, a whole host of other things.
Yeah. And that's just it. Like the beer that they drank wasn't just because they liked beer. There were medicinal reasons for them drinking it. And even the whole theory of, because of course the whole concept of it being fully slave labor that built the pyramids started with what you were talking about a minute ago, which was when religion got a hold of the pyramids for a little while. And it became like the slaves of ancient Egypt is who built them. And then it just became this dialogue of the pyramids were built by slaves. The pyramids were built by slaves. Well, they were pretty well housed slaves, if that's the case.
Right.
Because the quarters that are there aren't really like slave quarters. And they definitely said that there were some slaves, but most of them were actual viable, just workers.
Yeah, right. They certainly were workers. I mean, their citizenship status to me isn't that interesting. What I'm interested in is what they did and why they did it. You know, like a cotton gin invented by Eli Whitney. Doesn't matter if a slave turned the crank or if a free man turned the crank. I'm more interested in how the cotton gin worked instead of the citizenship of the status of the workers. So, you know. Yeah.
And those are just some of the examples, though, of where the dialogue of the pyramids has led over the years and how it myopically keeps the same mentality.
Oh, boy. I know about the same mentality. That's why I waiting for people to die off.
Well, and it's horrible to say that, you know, and I forget who, I think it was Oprah a few years ago that was talking about even like racial equality in America. And she's like, we're just waiting on some old people to die off and we'll have a whole new world, you know? And it's kind of sadly that way in a lot of the sciences and a lot of the advancements, you know, is that we've got to shake the old mentality of science and literally, as we discuss on the show all the time, the religion of science, where it comes to the fact of this is now dogma and doctrine. And if you go against it, you are anathema.
Oh, that's true. There's a lot of that going on. Egyptology eviscerated Robert Schoch when he said that the Sphinx may be older than what Egyptologists say. And that's not science when you just character assassinate somebody like that. So it's strange. And but one thing you can do is you can analyze the research methods used by anything, including Egyptology, the Orion correlation theory, and that'll give you an indication of the validity of the results of that research. A lot of things people don't realize is that precision doesn't validate a correlation at all. So, something can be precisely correlated to something, if you will, or point to something, but that doesn't mean that was the intent of the original builders. Like hydroelectric dams have vents or passages that point to stars. So precision doesn't correlate it doesn't validate a correlation. Thing. Math doesn't either. If you come up with some precise math, that doesn't validate a correlation. The Great Pyramid has 4 sides, and the group, the Beatles, had 4 members. So the reason why the Great Pyramid has 4 sides is to be in correlation with the Beatles, because the math is impeccable.
Yeah.
So you need a causation, which is another piece of evidence that ties the two things together, and there isn't any. There's no piece of evidence that indicates the Great Pyramid has a religious purpose or a symbolic purpose. So,
yeah.
But people just come up with that.
Well, because I guess, why else spend so long? You know, why devote that much to it? Why? And granted, it makes much more sense to devote it to it for the reasons that you're saying. To you know, increase water, increase food yield, all that kind of stuff than it does to make it as an unused tomb.
Correct. The largest structure in the valley of the Nile is actually the High Aswan Dam. It's probably 25 times as big in volume as the Great Pyramid. And it is, it makes electricity. But it's a great big structure with a great big cost that had a great big return on investment. And I think and a lot of that electricity is used to pump water so they can irrigate past the flood, the yearly flood. In fact, the High Aswan Dam ended the yearly inundation because the electricity created and the irrigation that was possible with the High Aswan Dam was much better than just the yearly flood. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, even speaking of the yearly flood, everything, people forget the water mastery that the Egyptians had. They lived on the river.
Oh, yes.
They knew its cycles. They lived by its cycles. And to once again discount the fact that, the rock for the pyramids was not quarried near the pyramids at all. It was quarried up. They recently found like the barge locks and all that stuff, or the docks where they parked the barges and all that, all of a few months ago, just before we had you on the last time.
Yes, very recent discoveries.
Yeah, and that's just further proof of the fact that, yes, the hypothesis that this was all mined up there, brought down the river on barges, it makes much more sense to me to actively use a barge and lock system, which would have already been known, things like that, to if they already knew how to dam things off, why even take it off a barge and push it through the desert that far? If you can just dam off part of the river and flood a channel to your work zone. Like
right. They were hydraulic geniuses. They with the Nile, they could go downriver with their barges and then back upriver using the wind. So I mean, they could do everything. A lot of high water related constructions, including the Joseph Canal into the ancient Lake Maurice, and a whole host of things. So it's an interesting subject. Certainly, I'm one of the few researchers who gives glory to the ancient geniuses in the Valley of the Nile who built the Great Pyramid. Other people, like Egyptologists, it's an agrarian civilization, and they had a death cult for the Pharaoh who was rich, and he had a big tomb. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and if they did pay for it for that reason, they really, really, really got gypped.
Oh boy,
because they didn't finish it. They didn't finish the tomb.
Yeah, and it didn't work.
Hey, he's dead. Yeah. He won't know, right?
Yeah. Well, we had a great leader. That was, revered by everyone. John Kennedy who died, but we just put him in a hole in the ground. We didn't spend $50 billion to entomb him. It's not sensical. But we're in a revolution of ideas and understanding, like those barges, right at the Great Pyramid. Those harbors.
Yeah.
And people are trying to break away from the ideas that Egyptology have and embrace ideas that the ancient people were geniuses, that the Great Pyramid helped people in a tangible way. So that's the revolution of thought that we're in right now.
Absolutely. And I think that more people, at least out there, and no, thanks to shows like Ancient Aliens, thanks to shows like Tesla Files, stuff like that, are getting more into the actual research behind this, getting more into other than just the accepted dialogue. So I'm sure that you have seen quite an uptick in your website and an involvement, and even people like me reaching out to you, Stephen. So thank you so much.
There's a huge amount of interest, and people, when they watch our video series on YouTube or read the book, they say, "Wow, this is compelling. This actually makes sense." So it's a wonderful feeling, and that warms my heart as just a humble researcher, that people are coming to give credit to both Edward Kunkel and the research we've done, building on his research about how the Great Pyramid was a water pump and the high technology associated with that.
Well, once again, thank you always for coming on the show. Anytime I contact you, you're like, when? And yes. I love that, because I love this conversation. It's so great to have it. At some point, we need to try to do a panel with like you and an Egyptologist. And
that would be interesting.
It would be interesting to have a tet for tet on that, and an open-minded one that's like willing to hear hypotheses and theories, and let's get into this,
If you can, I don't think the two things go together, open-mindedness and being an Egyptologist.
We'll see. It'll be interesting to see if we can make it happen regardless, Stephen. Before we let you go, let everybody know it is time for shameless self-promotion. So let them know where they can go to buy the video series, where they can go to get involved, where they can go to donate, anything and everything Pharaoh's Pump, other than our store and our website. Let them know. Well, because, we have your videos embedded. We have your books in our store, all that kind of stuff. That is what we do to help support our guests, is make that stuff readily available to our audience. But we also like directing them straight to people's websites where they can get involved with people. So let them know where they can go to get involved with the actual 501c3 organization, Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, and more, Stephen.
Well, it's all at our website at thepump.org. And if you go there, you can get links to our books, links to our documentaries. They're on DVD. The books are softcover or Kindle ebook format. You can be reading the book within minutes in the Kindle version. So there's that. Our YouTube channel, our Facebook presence, and we have a lot of information on our YouTube channel that people can view for free. Video series and the whole schmear. Yeah. So there's a lot of information, but I just ask people to find out about it before you pass judgment one way or the other. That's and right. I'm a researcher, so I think everyone should be a researcher, and that's what the revolution is about. Reading books and finding out information.
That's right.
They can contact me through the website as well.
Absolutely. Up top are all the follow links, all that kind of good stuff. You can follow them on Facebook, keep up with the latest updates. I love your meme images that you put out all the time.
They're a lot of fun. A lot of it has been about the Orion correlation theory and their research methods. And boy, you sure can get them to talk about it.
Yeah, you can.
At all.
Well, Stephen, once again, thank you so much. Please do hold the line real quick while we get things prepped for our next guest, Reverend Michael JS Carter, folks. He will be coming up right after our commercial break, right after this. With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7. The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com. And we are back, folks. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors. Full disclosure, I'm one of the owners of Podcast Cadet. While you're online checking that out, do make sure to stop on by the Curious Realm store. CuriousRealm.com/store is where you can find it. We have restored our store of old and added all kinds of new stuff, including the books of our guests that we are bringing on right now. Welcome back to welcome officially to the new show, Michael Carter. How have you been?
Hey, brother, I'm okay. It's a new year. I can't believe how fast January went by, but here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to some changes for everybody, obviously, but I'm looking forward to some positive experiences as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think I always look, I mean, I don't know of anybody that doesn't look at the new year as a chance to do something new. But, man, you know, there's always stuff like January, as we mentioned in our episode last week, is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And that's just one of those that, like, you know, you don't really see it fanfared as much as you really should.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of people do. And it's one of those that, like, you really get a chance to focus on things like that during a new time of year. So thank you so much for always taking the time to come on the show, number one. Number two, I have been waiting and wanting to have this conversation with you about UFOs in the Bible. We've had some fantastic conversations about manifestation,
yes.
changing your frequency to change your life, all kinds of things. But one of the first books that you put out was on the topic of aliens in the Bible. And
yes.
The idea of sightings in the Bible. So let's get into that a little bit, because it's not really something, as we've discussed before on the show, and as my audience knows, I'm a former Catholic seminarian. Not really something discussed in our faith openly. I don't think it's something, yes. I don't really think it's something that is discussed openly in any branch of Christianity from the pulpit, let's say. Not that there aren't ministers like you who are open-minded, who are open to interpretation through modern means, all that. But I don't know of anyone from the pulpit who is preaching this or teaching this necessarily, which is strange when you go through and read some of the scriptures. So let's go ahead and just dive into it real quick. What was it that first brought up this topic for you? Was this topic in your life before you went into ministry, or did this topic come into your life after you were already following the path of ministry, Michael?
Great question. It actually came into my life after my contact experiences. Prior to that, Chris, I had not even thought about it. I mean, I may have mentioned to you last time I was on the show, and I know people say, well, what rock did you crawl out from under? I just started watching Star Trek maybe 3-4 years ago. People are like, what? But I'm glad that I didn't watch it before, because the things that I will talk about or did talk about, people would say, oh, no, you saw that on TV. And I didn't. But after my contact experiences, and the way I'm wired is I'm not that much into propulsion systems, back engineering, the nuts and bolts part of it. Greater minds than I can deal with that. I was more interested in the spiritual transformation, if any, that happened or had the potentiality of happening after someone had been through this experience, because I knew it changed me. And then I started saying, well, if these beings visited me in 1989, and have continued to up until 2019, then that means I continue to have visits. Sometimes there's years in between, but if they came to me in 1989 CE, that means they were probably visiting folks in 1989 BCE. And so I started looking, and then I ran into Dr. Barry Downing. I'm going to be on a show tomorrow night with him, who kind of got me going. He's a retired Presbyterian minister. He's not an experiencer, but he came out with a book in 1968 called The Bible and Flying Saucers. And to me, it was like manna from heaven, because I was like, I'm a clergy person. Here's a clergy person talking about this. And so that's what got me going. And then I started, running into other people. And by that, I mean intellectually. There was Morris K. Jessup, who died under mysterious circumstances in the 50s, who had written a book called, I have it right here, where is it? UFO and the Bible. There was a woman I knew named C.L. Turnage. She has passed on. She was more like a Stitchin scholar, but Zachariah Stitchin. But she was a Christian woman, and she wrote a book called Holy Bible, an Extraterrestrial Transmission. Another woman, Dr. Virginia Brasington, from my part of town here in Asheville, North Carolina. She wrote a book called Flying Saucers in the Bible. And then there's a gentleman by the name of Ted Peters. He's out west. I forget what divinity school, but he wrote a book called UFOs, God's Chariots, Flying Saucers in Politics, Science, and Religion. And then he has an updated version of that book. So then I started saying, oh my God, this is very, very intriguing. And, reading the Bible from that perspective, it made more sense. What the Quran talks about flying, they can be interpreted that way, in the Quran. And the Baha'i faith talks about these beings. And so the groundwork was laid for me. And what I found out was, again, it made more sense. The questions I get from people who are starting to be open to this material, they're wrestling. And they say, can I be a Christian and still believe in UFOs? Of course, I answer in the affirmative. But that's how I started getting into it. And Dr. Barry Downing's book, there's a couple other books out there, Extraterrestrials and Biblical Prophecy by a guy named Shellhorn or Shelburne. So the idea was out there. The only difference was that I was an experiencer. And most of the people I just named were not. And I'm an ordained person, or are not. And so, I looked at, for instance, the Old Testament, and looking at the Exodus story, and they're following the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, and Moses is starting his ministry, and Yahweh is telling him, this is what I need you to do. This is what you're going to do. And so, then you realize, hey, there's no Jewish religion until the Exodus.
Yeah.
So that means that Judaism and Islam, pardon me, and Christianity were all influenced by the UFO phenomenon. And I'm not saying that these beings did it intentionally. I don't know. But this is how religions are starting.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, I think that if anything has become a lot of the I guess the study forward of people right now is trying to go back and interpret some of these through a modern lens. You know,
Yes.
I think number one, people forget when they are interpreting the Bible, and there are numerous interpretations of the Bible out there.
Exactly.
A couple that I lean on just because of their translation, coming from the original Coptic and Greek and the New Testament, the original Hebrew, in the Old Testament. But aside from that, there are so many references in there, like more than a couple of handfuls. Like you just said, the whole founding of the nation of Israel, which is, of course, I mean, the Abrahamic root of also Islam and Christianity.
Right.
Which has always been funny to me, how the three always seem to be in some kind of kerfuffle with each other.
Yeah,
but
they really are.
But they all come from this revelational root. And especially when you look in the Old Testament, I mean, there's, of course, the pillar of fire. But when you start getting into the story of Ezekiel, when you start getting into the story of, oh my gosh, his name just left my head. He was assumed into heaven.
Elijah.
Elijah. Yes, thank you. So let's start kind of breaking some of these down and looking at it, because once again, it's important, I think, to understand the culture in which these were written, and their understanding, just to understand the book itself.
Well, see that's what's key, Chris, because for ancient astronaut theorists, and even for scholars of other, I mean, and not that the two are mutually exclusive, but
sure.
we're trying to we're trying to see the world in which they lived in. And for me, the vernacular of their day, the vocabulary. And so they're seeing things, this technology, of course it's godlike to them.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to describe in the vernacular of their day what they're seeing. And so, okay, we did start with the Exodus. We didn't go into in depth, but they're following a UAP or whatever we call it now. It's a UFO. It's flying in the day. It's a pillar of cloud by day. It's a pillar of fire by night. Okay, the pillar of cloud. Sometimes we know these craft can camouflage themselves in clouds. At night they glow in the dark, and so it's a pillar of fire. So we have that. We also can go up to, as you said, Ezekiel. Of course, there's a wonderful book called The Spaceships of Ezekiel by Joseph Bloomrich. He's deceased now. He was a NASA engineer. He has a patent on the drawing that he used, the metrics that Ezekiel used. You can look at it online, and he came up with a craft. And he says, this is what Ezekiel saw. Of course, there is Elijah, who was taken up into heaven in a chariot. And so we there it is, the spaceships of Ezekiel. That's it. And so we start saying, wait a minute, this stuff is hidden in plain sight. And I find that what gets people anxious is this. Wait a minute, Reverend Carter. What are you and these theorists talking about? Are you saying God is an astronaut? It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying Yahweh is an astronaut. I'm not saying the primal cause in the universe is. And that's another thing that we have to deal with. But okay, so when we look at Yahweh, for instance, he is a very fragile individual. He has temper tantrums. He is very concerned about intermarriage. And not only intermarriage, but you have to be circumcised. Okay?
Yeah.
This doesn't sound like the behavior of a God to me. One could make the case as we go into the New Testament that Jesus may be talking about a different being than Yahweh. One could argue that. Certainly the Gnostics and the Manichaeans did.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course there's distortions in all of it. But this God, Yahweh, is he's got a lot of issues, for lack of a better word. And he's encouraging killing and looting and burning when they go into the promised land. We have to remember that the 10 Commandments, for instance, they were not the universal law that we're using now in Western culture. Those were just for Jews. You didn't sleep with your Jewish neighbor's wife. You didn't covet their property. You didn't murder, and because it's thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill. I forget the Hebrew word for murder, but you see, and so this doesn't sound very godlike to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because a point that we make on the show all the time when it comes to the 10 Commandments, things like that, is they are 10 great rules for a group of people that are living as a tribe traveling through the desert.
Yes.
If you are a nomadic society who are picking up stakes every single day and moving 10 miles that way toward the promised land, that is a great set of rules to live by, man. Because you may not want to covet your neighbor's goods. They live in the tent next to you. You need them to survive.
Yes. And so
even the rules, even the other rules, like don't eat shellfish. Yeah, you live in the desert. Might be a good idea. Might be a good idea not to eat pork. Doesn't really keep well. Like a lot of them were really, really just common sense rules for the time. For the time in which they lived and where they lived in the society that they had.
Yes. And so, just because someone did or said something 2,500, 3,000, 5,000 years ago doesn't mean it's relevant for what we do now. And for some people, that is just to say, I mean, you're not going to, if you catch a woman in adultery, you're not going to kill her and let the other person go free. Yeah. But remember, these are nomadic folks. And I'm not saying I got to put a 20th century lens on it. I'm just saying, but we evolve. And so, Yahweh is telling them in Leviticus how much they should charge for slavery. So this didn't seem like a God to me, but it did all my years growing up. But you know how it is. You're indoctrinated, and you're taught not to ask questions and what have you. And so then you have Jesus coming along, and Gabriel has got the greatest job in the Bible and even in the Quran. Everywhere he goes, women get pregnant.
Yeah,
everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they do it the old-fashioned way or insemination, but everywhere. He's with Miriam, Jesus' mother's pregnant. He's with Elizabeth, John the Baptist, Miriam's cousin, Elizabeth. She's pregnant. Yeah. I don't know who is, Okay, and you go back to Abraham. It wasn't Gabriel, but it was two angels. Yep. She gets pregnant. So it's a good job. But, so now we go, and so Jesus... he does a lot of things actually, but he was Jewish, but he was a different kind of Jew. And so he says, okay, this is what Moses told you. I'm not rebuffing that, but I'm going to give you another commandment. You got to love your enemies as you love yourself. You got to love the uncircumcised one. You got to love the Gentile. You got to love the Roman. You got to love the Samaritan. So Jesus comes along and he brings this love ethic, where the spirit of the law is greater than the letter of the law. But when you are a nomadic people governed by law, that in and of itself is a threat.
Well, especially when your law is intrinsically intertwined with your religion, with your priesthood, and your connection to your God. And I think one of the topics that we bring up regularly, at least through my study, the conclusion I have come to, roundedly, is that more than likely Jesus was a Kabbalistic student. It would utterly explain why the high priests were listening to him at 12 years old. I would love to say that it's because he's the Messiah and the chosen one. I don't think we'd have ended up in the situation that we ended up in with him, if that was the case. If at 12 years old they were recognizing that he was the Messiah and the chosen one. No, but they were definitely recognizing the fact that he had something to say. And the only reason why they would be listening to a 12-year-old is if he was one of those students at the yeshiva school that just shone above all others and was moved into the world of Kabbalism, into the world of the high priest of Melchizedek. Things like that, where, you start getting that direct connection to God and that teaching of the direct connection to God that Christ gave to everybody. It was no longer go buy a dove in the market, take it to the temple, pay the priest to sacrifice it, and your prayer will be heard. And that was shaken up a lot. That was shaken up a lot to come into some. I mean, that's what the whole tossing of the tables was about. Was that they were they were selling access to burnt sacrifice. You know.
Well, but I want to go back even further than that. No, your point is well taken. Jesus. Look, we know that this star may have been a ship. This man has told us that my kingdom is not of this world. My Father, he refers to my Father. I believe that. I don't think that's a metaphor, because if your mother is human and your father isn't, then you're not completely human. You're a hybrid. Yeah. And so he's bringing this different sensibility to this religion called Judaism. And he's meeting this resistance. At the time of his birth, it reminds me of what the Buddhists do. When there is a reincarnation, or when there is a birth of a special person, they send their priests, their monks to check it out. And these wise men come from the East because they follow this craft. But they had astrology, they had astronomers. They knew that at this time there was going to be a special birth. That reminds me so much of Buddhism. And so they travel to Palestine and they bring gifts. And so they get it, that there's this special soul that's been born. Now, of course, this is the last thing Herod wants to hear. And so, again, and what you were talking about Jesus saying that the God that he talks about, his Father, does not demand sacrifice. You don't have to, there's not human sacrifice. You don't have to kill the pigeons or what have you. This is strange to them. But he's telling us, my kingdom is not of this world. And so what's passing for wisdom for you in these earthly kingdoms is foolishness to my Father. And so he's starting now to cause a little tension. He's charismatic. He's righteous. He drinks and he carries on, and he hangs out with the undesirables. He's doing all these things that the law says you shouldn't do, but he's also healing. He's also teaching an otherworldly philosophy, an otherworldly perspective on what it means to be a human being. It's transcending Judaism. Now we're nervous. Now we're nervous. Now, you mean I got to love the Romans who keep their foot on our necks? The Samaritans, a totally different race of people. And so here we are now.
Yeah.
Now we have this. He's healing the sick. He's doing these things. As you were saying, brother, go on.
No, I was going to say, not only do you have to love the Romans, but you got to pay them what you owe them. Which like says, to the people that were trying to rebel and looking for somebody to lead them in rebellion against the occupation of Rome, that was like, what? What?
Well, they were looking for a military leader.
Yeah, exactly. They were looking for somebody that was supposed to be bringing the kingdom of David triumph.
Yes.
Not this dude that's like, no, seriously, dude. Yeah. Like, if they say pay him 10%, hell, man, give him 11. You know?
So you're starting to see. So you're starting to see where this may not end well. And then, but getting back to, he's, a ship is hovering over. At the baptism, a voice comes from the sky. When he leaves, he goes up, into a cloud. And so he leaves. And so again, now we have, was Jesus in touch with an extraterrestrial presence? We don't know where he goes, but we know sometimes he goes off. The Bible, the writers are saying he went to pray. I'm sure he did, but maybe he went to get recharged. He's leaving, he's got to go off by himself. But when you read Josephus has, this telling line. He says, I'm reading here, this is the Antiquities of the Jews, book 18, chapter 3. He says, now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to even call him a man. For he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as receive the truth with pleasure. And he goes on and talks about Pilate, and he was condemned to the cross. But for me, it's interesting. A wise man. So he was a teacher. But he says, if it even be lawful to call him a man. So already there's this otherworldly mystique about this individual.
Well, and, I'll just read real quick. Let me see if I still have this, because it is a skill to be able to read these things cold. But let me see if I can read Matthew chapter 7 real quick, which is the actual transfiguration of Christ. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. And Peter said to Jesus in reply, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make us 3 tents. Here, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then, from the cloud, a voice that said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Those words have always struck me because of course there's the other moment where the voice comes down and says, "This is my son," is the baptism of Christ. But I always thought that it was very interesting that a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Now, think about those words. Think about the way that how can a bright cloud cast a shadow over you? So really interesting. Now, if you're talking about a bright glowing object, sure. It's just fascinating to me, especially whenever you look at the transfiguration of Christ. His corporeal body changes. He is revealed to them in the truth that he is.
Yes. And we see his face shining like the sun. Same thing in Moses. When Moses comes down, from the mountain. And some people have said it's probably radiation because he was up there and all that technology and what have you. What's also interesting is who is there? Moses and Elijah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so again, when we start looking at it from those optics, because one thing that's so beautiful about this phenomenon is that there's the merging of technology and spirituality, which we've yet to achieve on this planet. We have the technology, but we don't have the wisdom for it. And we could very well destroy ourselves. Yeah. But one thing about this is this merging of some of these beings who are not all, obviously, but who are very highly evolved. And yes, they need ships to get around in, which is another reason why you have to say, what kind of God needs a ship? But here we have the beginnings of maybe a new religion coming out of Judaism. I mean, Jesus, if he's highly evolved, which he is, and he's healing the sick, okay? And so he's performing these miracles because they're miracles to people who don't know natural law. And he's a God-man. He's a God-man to them. And he's walking the walk. He's walking the walk. I mean, as far as we know, there's no discrepancies. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said.
And he did what he said.
Yes, but he's causing upheaval. And so he has to be gotten rid of. And so you have this archetype, this template of this all through UFO literature and all through religious literature.
Yeah.
Of the being called or chosen, being reluctant initially.
Yeah.
But then finding herself, and having powers and having in contact with these sources of power and protection along the way. I mean, this is even if you're not a Christian, you can be an atheist. This is the hero's journey we're talking about. This is the shero's journey that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty well pulled straight out of John Campbell, or Joseph Campbell, rather.
Well, Well, Joseph is pulling it out of them because this predates him. But yeah, and so for me, it's a way of looking. For me, like I said, with people, it doesn't take away from Jesus's ministry. But I find a lot of people are, they because they've been told certain things, and if you believe that, there's something wrong with you, and so they want to hold on for whatever reasons to their faith of origin. But this new information comes in, and now they're trying to digest it. And so, but the powers that be, the old powers, they don't want you to have this information. They don't want you to use this information because it takes power away from them. I mean, can you imagine? This is a little bit off topic, but if and when full disclosure is out there, it's going to cause a little bit of upheaval. Not because people are not ready. Of course, you can't have everybody ready, but Exxon doesn't want to hear about how you can travel from point A to point B without coal or gas.
Yeah.
Because you're taking money out of my pocket. People don't want to know that you can lay your hands on me, or just by the power of your mind, if you are trained well enough or what have you, these cancers and stuff will go away. That's not going to go over well.
Yeah.
With the kingdoms of the earth, because they're making money on it.
Yeah, and there are numerous studies out there that show the efficacy of the power of prayer and intention, especially for those in need of healing. all kinds of things. And yeah, it's not really something. It's something that is typically poo-pooed by the medical establishment whenever they're released. As
because it's going to take money,
things like
that.
Oh,
Money
absolutely. Well, and those of us who have been behind the legalization of cannabis for years have been saying the same thing. And lo and behold, even people like Sanjay Gupta, former head of WHO, stuff like that, have come out and said, like, wow, had the studies that I've seen independently been provided to me and not suppressed, my opinion medically would have been totally different on this. So, yeah, whenever you hear somebody that high up in the medical community where literally the studies that were provided him were totally to the contrary, and purposefully so. So it's interesting to see that. And it's hard, I think, right now, especially. I don't think that humanity will, like you said, I don't think that there's any way that you could ever have an overwhelming percentage of humanity ready. I don't.
Right. But you don't need that.
Exactly.
You don't need an overwhelming percent.
Yeah.
But it's all about who's going to control the narrative.
Yeah. I
see it now. When the military came out, they weren't as transparent as one would like, but they came out for whatever reasons, and but all of a sudden, at least for me, I started listening to, they're a threat.
Yeah.
What are they doing in our airspace? So it's like, okay, we need another enemy. So we'll admit that they're here, but they may not be friendly. Already, you can, and some of it's done intentionally,
sure,
and some of it is done because as a group, as a species, we're still coming from a place of fear. And so what we don't understand, we will destroy. Yes, you don't have to be Einstein to figure out that if these beings really wanted to take over, I mean, they've got 65th century technology.
Yeah, man, they can interstellarly travel, I think, or even wormhole travel, whichever one it is.
Yeah,
it's way beyond us. Like Stephen Hawking said, you may not want to be trying to contact them. Just saying.
Well, yeah, and that's his perspective. I mean, but the point being is just that when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And so if you're a cop and you go out, maybe all you see is pickpockets. If you're a priest, all you see is sinners. With the old adage, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Mm. But we see where that limited, fear-based, Newtonian, Cartesian worldview is no longer relevant.
Yeah. It's no longer valid to have the utter black and white mentality of an absolute. If you're thinking in absolutes, I think you're going to have a problem with the next decade. Smooth, with the revelations that will be coming out, with the technology that will be released, you're gonna have a real big hurdle personally and emotionally, folks.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And not, I wouldn't say the next decade, brother. I think the next age that we're going into, we're going to be talking about things we weren't even allowed to think of. Already we're talking about, we're just talking about it, but the impact of artificial intelligence, having robots and what have you. What does it mean?
Metaverse just came out. They've already come out with personal space rules because groping has started happening.
Well, yeah, okay.
Like you got virtual groping happening already within like a month of a platform occurring.
What does it mean? What does it mean to be human? Is what we're talking. And most of the people that I know who are against transhumanism, I don't know enough about it, so I can't speak on it. What I hear is this underlying concern, and it's valid, that I may not so much be against it, but I don't think we have the wisdom to use it in an ethical way.
Yeah. And I could definitely see that concern. I can definitely see that because it's one of those, the technology is still so young. And I have said that for years when it comes to hard genetic research. And believe me, like I have a brother that just went through like amazing scientific, like Wolverine status medical procedures, Reverend, that he had to go through. Having a full replacement of immunosystem, things like that. But even then, there are detractors of it when it comes to a religious aspect. When it comes to, wait a minute, you're talking about stem cells. And there's still huge stigmas, and it's strange how the morals and mores change, but the fear stays the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like when we're looking at it now. We have a lot of needs, not just, of course, on the planet, but in our society. And, when it comes to saber rattling and I don't want to oversimplify, I'm not a diplomat or what have you, but when it's time to rattle the sabers and come up with money for war, whether it's with China or Russia, no questions are asked. Where's that money coming from?
Yeah.
How are we going to get that? But when it's a program for the kids or to pay teachers more money or forgive school loans, where's that money coming from?
Yeah.
The priorities are skewed. And you see that with whether it's transhumanism, how do we distribute that? What does that happen for most of the people who are not privileged? Yeah. How do they get health care? How would transhumanism affect them? Those are the things, but we see that, it's 1%.
Yeah.
It's the 1% who are running stuff, and that's just not just. But if you can't call it, and I see that's where people are afraid, these folks have the privileges, and so I may not get what's due me because I'm not in that select few.
Yeah.
And so, same thing with healthcare.
Yeah.
What about people who don't have it? And all the religions of the world are all talking about, to a greater degree, how do I treat my neighbor? How do I treat my planet? The Buddhists go on talking about all sentient beings. I love that. Christianity doesn't seem to get that. It's about conquering the earth and taking over the earth. And we're at war with nature. Nature is something to be conquered.
Yeah.
And so that's a perspective. I'll put it to you like this. It's changing, obviously, and you and I know that. But basically, science is still saying, not talking about quantum physics, quantum theory, quantum mechanics, but basically science is saying, show me and I'll believe. Yes. Show me and I'll believe.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like that. And so a more spiritual perspective or a more faith-based perspective, call it what you will, is believe and I'll show you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are two very, very different ways of looking at the world. And if one group of people who has all the wherewithal and the power and the privilege goes with either one of those, because they could be extreme, you're going to have problems. And right now, we're still living in that world of show it to me, and then I'll believe you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes for so many things. Even whenever you're talking about cryptids, Bigfoot, anything like that, you're short of having a body on a slab. I mean, there are some people right here in Texas that I'm trying to get a hold of, that, yeah, like that's part of their thing. They actively go out and hunt for Bigfoot, because they believe that that is the only way to protect them, is to provide science with a corpse. Like if it takes us bringing you a corpse,
yes,
then by golly, we will find you one. We will hunt it. We will kill it, and we will bring it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah. So here we are. It's an exciting time.
Yeah.
To be on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's a concerning time as well.
Why do you think, and this is just a personal question to a reverend, why do you think people have such a problem, I guess, allowing for the existence, though they believe in something greater than themselves? Because I mean, we've had the discussion about personal revelation. We've had the discussion on this show before, well, in the previous incarnation of this show, about, you know, the experiencer and how it changes your life, and how the call of the divine or the touch of the divine is no different than the touch of the extraterrestrial or the paranormal. And though people have faith in one right, why is it that you think that they fear the information?
I think there are a lot of things involved with that. Sometimes it's harder to unlearn something than it is to embrace something new. Mm. And we've all been taught the Cartesian Newtonian worldview. We've been taught that. Secondly, I believe that we have to have compassion, because everybody is on a different level of evolution. And so in some ways, we may be expecting too much of folks. I mean, I said at the beginning of the show, I could not even fathom Star Trek, so I would never watch it. Do you know what I mean? Look where I am now. And so people are at different stages of evolution. And we forget, whether it was this lifetime or earlier in this life, there were times when people probably looked at us and said, man, you're not getting it, are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking that, and it's frustrating because human evolution can be slow, but we have to remember that you can only go as fast as the slowest person, especially if you're going to be a leader, and that people are where they are. I mean, and you know, people have different soul ages. You have some politicians out here who think sex, drugs, rock and roll, and power are the way to go. You've got kids who know better. They may be in young bodies, but they're old souls. And so everybody is at a different stage of evolution, and we're just not going to see it the same way. And sometimes we're going to have our fear. Some people will be able to manage their fear of the unknown. Some people won't. Some people will hurt you over it. But this is the way that it always is. Jesus had to go through it. Buddha, Mother Teresa, Joan of Arc. They've all had to go through it. And that's part. Now, it may be different on another planet or another dimension. But here, this seems to be the way. Now, I'm not saying people can't grow from joy and love and what have you, but here, collectively speaking, we seem to have to go through a hard time before we get it.
Yeah. And that's absolute truth. I know, despite my world of education, despite the things that I did in life for the good of the world, I still fought my battle with addiction. I still fought my battle with absolute demons that I let in the window, you know? And that was after I had done all that. So yeah, like you said, everybody's on a different journey, and I think that we're all too ready to judge somebody else or their experience from our journey's bridge, you know.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. I'll give you a quick illustration.
Please.
And I know we could go on with this. When I was younger, I had a friend named Frank Barra. Frank was a retired actor. He was a masseuse. He was a very, very, very talented artist. He happened to be a gay man. And he had a friend named Andre. And I mean, they've been together probably at that point as long as I've been alive. I don't even know if Frank is still alive now. Anyway, I was very social justice oriented, and you know, I would let stuff get me. And he used to tell me, Michael, don't let this get in the way of you living your life. And I used to be like, well, you don't get it. You know, you don't get it. You know, you're a 60-some-year-old man, maybe even older, and you come from it. I mean, look at the world. What do you mean? And he was an old soul, definitely. And now, to make a long story short, I'm where Frank is. But I couldn't see it back then. I thought he didn't get it. Yeah. I thought he was out of the loop. I thought he was out of touch. I think it was Nietzsche who said, don't let your cause become your identity. And I'm not saying that people who are hardcore activists, if that's what you're called to do, please do it.
Yeah.
I just know that a lot of my friends are activists, and some of them, they have a problem for every solution, and they can never really rest because they've got to put out every fire.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, that's not everybody. So people listening, I'm not saying, because I still have my causes, and whether I write a check or whether I march or whatever whether I feed the hungry or whatever, I choose to do what I can do. But I don't get angry when everybody is not doing it the way I think they should do it.
Well, you know, I think that what a lot of people in, specifically in your position with the media, tend to forget, Michael, is that what you are doing is a vocation in and of itself. To go on to national/worldwide television on shows like Ancient Aliens, with the title Reverend before your name, and be marrying these topics, be talking about this kind of knowledge in this thought form unabridged, that's missionary in and of itself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, and I try to do that and be as, you know, forthright as I can. And of course, I'm a co-parent. I'm in a relationship. You know, I'm living my life as well. And but what I'm trying to learn is just to get it that people are going to see things differently. And I need to be able to give up having to be right. I don't have to attend every fight I'm invited to.
Yeah.
And so I put it out there. And like Jesus says, you know, some seed will fall on hard ground. Some of it will fall and it'll be eaten up. And some of it will be fertile ground.
Yeah.
And I just have to trust that those who need, he or she who has an ear to hear, let them hear.
That's right. And be as supple as a reed, you know?
There you go. Yeah. And so that's how I'm trying to walk this journey.
Well, and speaking of walking journeys, and I know that we talked about it whenever we had you on at the release of your new book, Initiation. Let's talk for a minute about your experience as an experiencer. And I know that we touched on it quickly in that episode, real quick, or just lightly, but what was it like for you as a person of color to come out as an experiencer?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because
we touched on it. We touched on it a little.
Yeah, but I mean, was it harder for you? Was it different for you? Was it harder for you to go to members of your family, things like that, with your experience?
Yeah. Wow. Great questions. You know, my parents were, God bless them. they just kind of, my mom and I talked about it, and she's more open to metaphysical stuff. She doesn't understand it, but she was never ridiculed. My stepdad just never talked about it, and it reminds me of the definition between functional and dysfunctional families. Oh. Functional families deal with challenges and stuff. So he just never brought it up. My mom would bring it up, or I would talk to her about it. For me, it was difficult. It wasn't okay. With the dominant culture, with the population, of course, whether it was black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, to talk about this stuff was anathema, or you were crazy. Sure. What I found, though, was like with people of color, and it wasn't just with this, it was like with Reiki or stuff like that. Where's Jesus in that? Where is that a Christian thing? Yeah. And so it was automatically suspect. Or talking about UFOs, that doesn't happen to us. That happens to white people. What are you talking about? However, that was at the beginning. Here we are 20, 25 years later. I'm hanging in. And now I'll get an email. I'll get a call from folk of color. I saw you on Ancient Aliens. Yeah. It's about time they had some people of color on there. I saw you on this show. And let me tell you about my experience. Let me tell you about what happened to me. What do you think, Reverend Carter? Was this one? So it's more people are open now. Yeah. Not many as one would like, but now I find people of color, they'll contact me and they'll congratulate me for being on the show, but they'll also say, I read your book, or let me tell you what happened to me. I think this happened to me. Yeah. But it's not marketed. It's not sought after. Yeah. And so that market, that group is not sought after, but I'm thinking that that's going to change. The last few, before COVID, the last couple of conferences I went to, it wasn't overwhelming, but I've been to conferences when I've been the only person of color. So, sure. I see more people of color showing up. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. And I think we're going to see more of it. And I just think that, like anything else in our society, if we're having these issues around race and culture, it's going to show up in all, whether it's sports, whether it's, just everyday living, whether it's in banking or what have you, you're going to see that kind of discrimination and maybe not being taken as seriously. But like I said, I think it's changing, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, and the whole reason I brought that up is because, once again, you could not get more missionary. In the fact of, like you said, even without it being brought out that way or being put out that way, people are coming to you with their story. And even just the healing of that, even just the process, because I know it happened with me with Dudes and Beer whenever we first started having Dr. John Hall on. It was after that first step. And I mean, we had done things like 10 episodes in, we were out live at Mikamoto auction with press passes, we had a lot of cool stuff. But it wasn't until then that I realized how far our reach and impact could be as a little show from Austin, Texas. And that's when I got an email from a targeted individual on our website from Israel who was listening to the show and gave me like a page and a half of the most heart-wrenching story I've ever read. And it steeled me. And it was one of those like, man, we gotta talk about this more.
Well, I first of all, I appreciate you bringing it up. When I was on Dudes and Beer. And then I think Mark Eddy, we did a show and he did, because for me, you've got to be able to talk. Yeah. And I know a lot of white producers don't want to get into it because they don't. Yeah, the first level of resistance is, okay, now we're talking about race instead of UFOs, but it doesn't have to be versus or instead of. No. We live in a society. And so now more people of color are saying things. So it doesn't mean the rest of the show will be about race. So, or that's necessarily a bad thing. No. However, what I will say to you is, I appreciate you bringing it up. You brought it up last time. They brought it up on Dudes and Beer. I was on a show that Mark Eddy produced with a woman by the name of Ramona Scott, who happens to be a woman of color. We see it differently because obviously we're not a monolith, but it's got to be talked about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it's one of those that anywhere you go culturally, even regionally, culturally in America, across the globe, these things are approached with different attitudes.
Yes.
And even like I'm Cajun.
Yes.
You go to a lot of the older people, they're very, very superstitious about talking things, especially amongst the black culture in Cajun culture. They're much more superstitious about things and talking about them.
Yes.
Like they don't even talk about it because they're just so I think it's interesting and a point that we once again have to understand how that impacts things in order for actual disclosure to happen. Even here recently with, and granted, folks, you may have seen the headlines where it was like, NASA hires Vatican officials. Not quite the case. It was more like they put into a study that was studying like what would happen if news was released, and it happened to be a bunch of theologians that were doing the study. But if you're going to go to a bunch of people about, hey, what should we do if we find this? What a perfect group of people to go to. Because if you're going to, hey, if the Catholic Church has managed to do anything just about, it's maintain a unified teaching the world over. How do you do that?
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to, about, the cultures. You see it in native culture. A lot of it is superstition. I don't want to say it's superstition, but what I will say is, but there's some things that are not talked about because that stays in group.
Yeah.
Sure. Like some native tribes in the United States will talk about star people. Some of them will say, no, they're not ready for that. So they don't. Yeah. And so, but also there's the old saying that we're as sick as our secrets.
Yep.
And that could be from dysfunctional families. It could be from dysfunctional governments. I did read that article, and I was excited I thought it was a step forward.
Absolutely.
And then I found out, I read something that it wasn't true, basically about what you were saying. Yeah. I do think that, and I'm not pushing this for me, but you need some other voices in there.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't had the experience, you need that. And I'm not saying, you should call Reverend Michael Carter. If they did, that'd be fine. Sure. But, because you get a select few and they have the knowledge and the power and the glory. And again, it's this group and everybody else is outside.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, you want to be as transparent as you can. But you may want to put out there to clergy, how comfortable are you with talking about these experiences? Have you had any of these experiences? So I looked at that news as a baby step forward, but you could already see the how problematic it could be. We're going to select a group.
Yeah.
What's the criteria? Who has the authority to do that?
Yeah.
How comfortable are they with other religious perspectives, with other religions, with metaphysics, that kind of thing? So you need more of a select group.
Yeah.
And you need the transparency.
I think the transparency is what's really key, and I think that is what I think that's what has most people concerned, is the obfuscation of things that have happened over the years. I mean, of course, the utter plausible deniability that's been thrown into everything.
Yes.
But
yes.
We are really coming to a head with so much, and I don't think that any of this release is by mistake or accident.
I agree.
That's just me looking at things and looking at how things have been released, and the other small things here and there scientifically, articles and stuff like that. But
well, I think that we're being programmed, could be too strong a word. We're being groomed. I mean, if you look at, my God, there are 3 or 4 Star Trek movies out, and they're already talking about more. There's Prodigy for teenagers. So now you got that market.
Yep.
You've got Discovery. You've got the Orville coming back. You've got Picard.
Yeah.
You've got the new rendition with a man of color, the new remake of The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was science fiction is now becoming science reality, and we're being prepared for the world in which, and that's not by accident.
Yeah.
Hollywood has always been a tool of the powers that be, because that's how you get to control the masses. So we're being kind of gently led into this kind of new world.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting that you bring that up, because so many times we have talked about this process of, quote, soft disclosure that goes on where like you're being led down, so to speak, the primrose path. And it's like, oh, here, look at this. Oh, look at this. Oh, look, this happened too. And it's like, well, wait a minute. All those things wouldn't be in place and happened.
Right.
If these other things weren't happening, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting to see that, really psychological normalization, like you said, almost a grooming process, of preparing people for what is to come. How about now? Granted, I'm of the same mind. Most of my audience is of the same mind. What do you think? Like, I know years ago I had a conversation with a gentleman that is unnamed, but was pretty high up in the UFO communities, who said that we are basically looking at the preemption of Project Bluebeam, which has never been found to be an official program or anything like that. But the whole concept behind Project Bluebeam is to slowly give the world population enough information to say, fake an alien invasion, or to put those of religious background at unease or unrest with the concept of life from outside. So in concept of a means of uprising and control. So, and I don't know. A lot of the things that I've seen are just one of those, like, man, it rings home to that phone conversation that I had with him. And this was like 7 years ago almost. But yeah, it's just really, really strange to see all that. What do you see coming down the pipeline, I guess, religiously, when it comes to churches? Have you heard any rumblings or anything like that about, I guess, a mentality shift toward these things of acceptability, understanding?
I think a couple of things. I think that we will be having more tension between You know, are we a Christian nation, and what does that look like, as opposed to dealing with all faiths? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I see that coming more intensely. I feel that as far as UFO stuff is going on, I think the cat's out of the bag, and that, you know, people are gonna have to come clean. And I think shows like yours and shows like the ones I do and talking about this, I think this is an idea whose time has come. I think we're going to be hearing more about consciousness studies, about psychic phenomenon, about stuff that we weren't even allowed to even think about. I just think it's going to be a wild ride, man. I think that the government will see. There's a lot of stuff going on, as you know. You know, they're rattling sabers, and of course, there's COVID, and then I'm hoping that will kind of, just the coverage of that will just, I'm just tired of it. And this alarmist thing, but to my mind, but, you know, I think it's going to be a wild ride, globally as well as in our country. And there's a lot of lessons to learn. Religion is going to push back because a lot of the churches are getting smaller. Attendance is getting lower.
Yeah.
And if they're going to be relevant, that's the other thing, brother. In order to be relevant, people want to know, how is this going to help me live my life now? Whether it's Catholicism, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's any ism. And if you can't if the leaders of the church can't come up with some answers, there's going to be a different kind of religion, I think we're going into, where it's a conglomeration of nature, of the cultivation of one's inner life, which I call spirituality. And it may not be as much about dogma and doctrine going forward.
Yeah.
Especially now in the technological age. I think people say, well, the danger of it in a technological age is it gets more secular. But then there's some truth to that. But I think as we get more technological prowess, as we evolve, we realize that some of us, that this God thing, man, it's not just out in the sky, it's inside me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't need to have all these priests and priestesses and do's and don'ts and what have you. I can get my guidance by tuning in to God, or call it what you will. And I think in a highly technological society, yes, it may seem secular to some, but if there's a merging of spirituality, you know, obeying the laws of nature, and then being able to deal with the technological prowess that we have, that's called evolution.
That is a big message for a man with the word Reverend before his name, Michael. I'm just saying, like, that is revolutionary. I've heard a lot of ministers. I've crossed a lot of paths religiously, spiritually. I cannot say as I have ever heard a minister as bold as you ready to say that. Ready to say that the typical, quote, institution in which we are in is broken and needs to go.
Yes. And that's what you're going to see. I'm glad you said that. You're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of that going forward because the old way is not working anymore.
Yeah.
Einstein allegedly said that the religion of the future will be a cosmic religion, covering both the natural and the spiritual. And it should be based on a religious sense arising from the experience. See, that's the experience of all things, natural and spiritual, as well as a meaningful unity. I remember when I became a Unitarian Universalist, when I left the Christianity of my youth. And when I was in seminary, Dolores Williams, who was a really profound and well-known African-American scholar in the not philosophy of religion, but anyway, she kept asking me in the context of being a Unitarian, well, where do you get your authority? Where do you get your authority? And I was trying to tell her, well, I am my authority.
The authority is self-derived.
Yeah, I'm coming from a God consciousness. I'm coming from, so it's not outside of me. She could not see that. I know where she was going. Well, it's so individual, but a lot of it is individual.
Yeah, that's just it. It's nothing that you could learn from any epistemology classroom or textbook.
Right, she was my systematic theology professor.
Yeah, and hey, once you hit seminary, you start taking these upper level philosophy and theology courses and philosophy of theology, things like that. And it really does, at some point, much like I asked my spiritual director when I had my break with, I'm still a very spiritual person. I still personally identify as Catholic, even though I am not a mass practitioner. I am not a regular Eucharist receiver. I go when I feel called. I do not feel called to go every single Sunday. However, that's a part of my life and a part of how I define myself. That doesn't change my spiritual path. That changes my religious path. And what's there. That does not change any validity to anything. Not one bit. But there are a lot of people who would not see that and would not see the fact that that is a personal spiritual path. They would just see it as not that. So,
well, I kind of understood. I thought I did where she was going. She was saying, probably to me, not New Age, but she was saying this new spirituality that everybody's talking about is very individualistic. So what about the needs of the community? I get that.
Sure.
But in order for me to be able to accomplish what I need to in community, I need to be first right with me.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about you wait until then, but I need to be cultivating my own inner life. I need to make that caterpillar become a butterfly. And then I go out. They're both simultaneously, but she could not see. It was like the authority. She wanted me to give her an answer that the authority came from outside of me.
Yes. That the authority came through anointed hands, and those anointed hands were put in power by the hierarchy of whatever church letters you were with. Same thing as a Catholic priest being anointed by his bishop, through the order of Melchizedek, and that is where they derive their in persona Christe every day in Mass and in the sacrament of confession, the sacrament of sacrament. But that is from which and where the quote authority is derived. And that's why they would say, hey, average person, don't pick up Chris's rite of exorcism off the shelf over there and go around and start trying to perform exorcisms. Because from where does your authority derive?
And it just wasn't, she could not get to it. And that was okay. It was the same thing Jesus went through. Mm-hmm. When he says, before Abraham was, I am, or I and my father are one, he meant that because I'm thinking that his father is an extraterrestrial, but also I'm one with all that is. And so are you. So are you if you so choose to believe that.
And
yeah,
that was part of our conversation last time, actually. And before we let you go, because I know we only have you for a few more minutes anyway. But part of what we talked about last time was because,
well, you know what, we can go to 7. We can go to 7.
Okay, cool.
Might as well,
because I would love to get into this, because I think the source of a lot of people's issues, whether it be the targeted individuals in our audience, whether it be abductees in our audience, how much of that comes from almost our own self-fulfilling prophecy, Reverend? How much of that comes from, even having that victim mentality mindset? And what
do you mean being a contactee?
Well, not necessarily being a contactee, but being an abductee, things like that. And possibly even being a contactee. Is it the fact of your being a contactee is what bases you spiritually, or is it your spiritual base that allows you to accept being a contactee?
I want to be careful in my answer, because I think there's no formula. I never considered myself an abductee. Even after I went through hypnosis and found out that, I was taking a border craft or what have you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I never consciously remembered that. That came up. But I was awake when these beings were in my room. All the time they would come when I was awake. It wasn't a dream, and they touched me, that kind of thing. Mm. I just want to be careful, because there are people who are good folk and they've had bad experiences.
Absolutely.
Sperm and ovum taken and probes, and I don't want to blame them that you were a victim.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as simple as that. When I was in New York and I got help, one of the things outside of going to a therapist was I joined a support group. And I joined a support group where everybody in my group had said, yes, this was traumatic and what have you, but I've grown so much from it. And Bud Hopkins, and Bud and I were friends.
Oh, wow.
But Bud's group was people who these are mean people, they're evil, what are they doing? So again, two different ways to look at it. And I don't want to say to them, oh, well, yes, they took your sperm. Yes, they took your ovum. Yes, you had painful things done to you. But if you just change the way you look at it, I think that would be belittling to them.
Yeah. Oh, the same as any rape victim.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, there were those folks like me who there were certain things that were done that were kind of painful, but in the long run, we said, look what kind of people we are. Look how we've changed. And so, and of course, there's always the middle. I always say, for me, that I may not be able to control what happened, but I can at least control how I react to it or respond.
Sure.
And I had some things that I thought were scary, because I later learned it wasn't them, it was me, but it was just as real. So to me, it's almost like blaming someone who got cancer that they were a victim because they were negative or they had negative thought patterns. Now, part of that is true, but you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Because they come. I had a psychic tell me, people ask me, why do they come to you? I don't know. I had a psychic tell me, who I never mentioned that I was having visitations. He told me that I was having visitations. I never mentioned it. And he said, you have been with these people in other lifetimes. Oh, wow. And that you have made an agreement with them. before you came here between lives. He told me this in 1993. And that's why you're having these visits. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't remember agreeing to anything, but that doesn't mean maybe my soul remembers that.
Sure. Hey, man, how much do you remember of first grade? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
that's what happened. And I kind of believe that, not in any grandiose, I got this big message for everybody. No, but, this guy, I was astounded that he even knew. He described the beings.
Wow.
Because I told him I didn't know. I lied. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, of course you do. So, but for someone else, it could have been just the wrong place at the wrong time,
sure.
or they were just, they being the star people, or just were just doing research and they saw I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mystery in a lot of ways why it happens to certain people, and why some people it's really kind of kumbaya-ish, and for other people it's terrifying, and
Yeah. And I have yet to have that experience. I know I have had my experience with what I would know to be the divine, and even that had its moments of fear within it. Fear,
of course,
and unease. Going back and reading scripture, I can firmly identify with those people that trembled in presence.
Oh, yeah, I know I did. I mean, my ex-wife told me when, when I wrote this book, Initiation, and I sent her a copy, and she said, I remember that night.
Wow.
She said, I've never seen you so afraid. And, it's like the mysterium tremendum, because I noticed that, and I think a lot of experiences go through this, especially if you kind of thought it was positive. In the long run, you kind of longed for them when there were breaks. Like I know I did. It was like, because sometimes years would go by.
Yeah.
And I would not have had, maybe in a dream or something, but I mean, when they were actually in my room. And the very thing that scared me was the very thing I longed for.
Interesting. Because that was going to be my next question was, were your experiences, especially your latter experiences, I could understand how the first experience may be utterly intrusive and uninviting. When it just happens to you. However, go ahead.
No. Well, they were always scary to me, and they still are, but only because of the suddenness in which they can happen.
Okay.
And at the beginning, I was seeing different races. So you get, I was starting to get used to, in quotes, seeing these little whitish gray folk. And then a couple of times I saw reptilians.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm freaked out even more. Okay. And then, time goes by. I'm still seeing the little gray, whitish people. And then I had a healing. That healing I had of the blood clot, that was from a humanoid, blonde, blue-eyed person. Okay? That when some years had gone by. Then in 2019, coming back from the conference I spoke at, someone told me, a psychic there told me, I see these I see praying mantis people around you.
Oh, wow.
And I said, oh, okay, what am I supposed to say? And then she said, no, I'm very serious. She said, in 3 days' time, you should see them. And I said, what? And in 3 days, I saw them. They were in my bedroom.
Wow. And were these experiences that you had, even with multiple races, were they experiences that happened at least semi-regularly, or like you said,
yes.
there were years in between, but whenever they did happen, were they like concurrent, numerous nights in a row, or would they go in spurts? How did they happen?
At the beginning, they were twice a month. Full moon, new moon. Full moon, new moon.
Wow.
And that went on for about 8 months to a year. And they always came when my girlfriend was out, because she worked at night. It was always, I was paralyzed. They would show me in my mind's eye what they were doing. On one occasion, they spoke. The reptilian spoke. And that was pretty intense.
What did they say?
The reptilian just told me, please don't. Well, it didn't even say please, but it was a voice of, he did say, and it was a he, it's okay, don't be afraid. Which is easy to say when you walk through my wall in my bedroom.
Yeah.
The grayish white people, they didn't talk, but they would show me pictures. One time they showed me a picture of me in a past life as a monk, a Catholic monk. And then they showed me a picture of me in modern times in a three-piece suit. I was speaking at a church, and that event actually did happen. When I was in Boston at an anti-racism meeting, I had a visit, and I was paralyzed, and they showed me a picture of hands in the prayer position with a lightning bolt in between it, and there was like a little icon of a gray pointing at it, as if to say, don't look at me, look at this. And that's what got me more into the hands-on healing, because they were hands. As a matter of fact, my business card, my personal business card, I use that logo. It's prayer, hands in a prayer position with a lightning bolt through it.
Wow. And
that's what got me into, I thought that meant prayer and healing. And that was in Boston. They came one night. I was in a hotel. And then some years had gone by where I thought I would feel them around, or I just sensed them, but I didn't see them. Or sometimes I would meditate and their face would come up. Then in 2013, I was healed. I had a blood clot.
Oh, wow.
And I think I told you about that, but maybe I didn't. It's like a country western song. I was getting divorced. My dad had died, and I was getting fired from my job as a chaplain because new people came in. And I wound up with a blood clot. Never had a blood clot before. It was from my ankle on my right leg all the way up to the groin area. I went to a doctor. My ex-wife said, you need to get that checked out. You've been in excruciating pain for these many days. And I didn't believe it. I just said, well, maybe it's a muscle pull. And then she said, you really should go to the hospital, which I didn't. But I finally did. I went to my doctor. He said, did you drive yourself here? My primary care. He said, I said, yeah. He said, can you drive? I said, yeah. He said, I need you to go and get an MRI. You have the largest blood clot I have ever seen.
Wow.
He said, if it breaks, I said, it's going to ruin my day. He said, even worse. So I went. I was on Coumadin, and I was injecting myself with this blood thinner called enoxaparin. On July 4th, 2013, at 10 minutes to 9, at 9:50 p.m., a humanoid being appeared in my bedroom, blonde, blue-eyed, with a hoodie, massive physique, almost as tall as my ceiling. I turned over, and I saw this being there. I thought my heart was going to come out of my throat, like it did at my very first one, in December 28, 1989. And this being, held his hand out, and an apple green light came out of his hand. He had on not a hoodie. What do you call them?
Like a cloak?
A cowl. A cowl.
Okay.
He had on a robe with a belt, a rope belt, and a hoodie. You could see the muscles through the robe. That's how built he was. And he held his hand out, and an apple green light, I remember, hit me in my stomach. I didn't feel anything, but I saw it. And then he dissolved. He just dissolved, like his molecules dissolved. My leg was swollen like LeBron James. We were trying to get it down. I looked at my leg, and it was normal. I called Preston Dennett. Don't know if you know Preston. He's written 2 books on UFO experiencers being healed, UFO healings. He was not home. He lived on the West Coast. I called him it was 9:50 my time, July 4th, 2013. I called him, and he was out. Obviously, it was, just 10:07. I got up the next day. I went to see my ex, my second ex. I've been married twice. And my daughter. It was almost like they had rehearsed it. They both gasped and said, "They healed your leg." I had to go. That's it. My story's in that one.
Wow.
He also has a one before that. Yeah. I went to the doctor, and it's called UFO healings. I have it here. That's one. He's got one before that. Anyway, you keep scrolling.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell them the truth. They would have locked me up, but they would not let up. What happened? Why did this happen? How did this happen? And they wouldn't. I said, I was just here. They said, look, you were here just 10 days ago, a week ago. How did this happen?
Wow.
And finally, I just said to them, maybe if you had gone to maybe the second one, because that book is I'll finish the story. That book has all these healings in it. He had a smaller book, so he incorporated all of them. That book has all of them, but he included mine in that one, my healing. It's worth to have that book, but he had a book before them too on UFO healing, smaller book. And so I just told them, aren't you happy for me? I can't explain it. You can't explain it. But the blood clot is gone. And they backed off. And I said, I'd like to get off of this medication, if you would. And they hemmed and hawed, and I still haven't really recovered from it. They said I would. I get colder now. It feels, I don't know whether it's circulation or lack thereof. I get cold very easily now. My hands get cold. Now, when I do the Reiki healing, of course, they get warm and they get hot. But I never got back to normal after the blood clot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And to know that you were healed by that experience, that
oh,
was...
yeah. My leg was so swollen, Christopher. It
Wow.
was so big. Like LeBron James, I wish I was built like that. My right leg. And they healed me.
Wow.
They healed it. They fixed that leg. That whatever that green thing, ray or whatever it was,
Yeah.
it healed my leg. It even looked now you wouldn't be able to tell because you didn't know me before. It even looked like the veins were redirected.
Wow.
In the leg. Yeah.
Wow. And what did the doctors have to say to this event?
I didn't tell them. That's what I was telling you. I didn't tell them that. They wouldn't let it go. Well, how did it happen? Wait a minute. We just saw you a week ago. We just saw you 10 days ago. Your leg was still, the medicine doesn't work that quickly. Well, I don't understand. And finally, I just said, are you happy? Because I don't understand either, but I'm better.
Yeah.
Isn't that something to be happy about? I get it. You're a scientist. You want to know how. I don't know how, but I'm better. It's gone.
Yeah.
And we left it at that.
Wow. And now, How has experiences like that helped you actively minister to other experiencers?
Well, I don't know. I guess we have to ask them. I know that my non-judgmental attitude, my taking them seriously, my being able to say, listen, I hear you. These things are high strangeness to the nth degree. And I don't share that with everybody because, I'm there for them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take the thing away from them. If it was relevant, maybe I would have brought it up. But I think the mere fact that I am a clergy person, that I'm a leader in the community, and that I'm kind of down to earth, which I am, I think all of those go into, I take them seriously. I think all of that contributes to healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had people say, well, boy, they must want you to stick around for something if they healed you. And, I'm still here. But that did happen to me. And I'll tell you something that happened, but I don't want to get into too much because it's my daughter and she's, she has her own private life. She's 15. Last year, I keep my daughter on certain days of the week and I see her every other weekend. We're very close. And I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, wanting to move to a house, but this is where I live. One night, my daughter got up and she went to the bathroom. It was about 3:00. Usually when I had my visits, now this is 20 years ago, it was usually any time between 3 and 5. Anyway, the next morning, my daughter says to me while making breakfast, she said, Daddy, where'd you go last night? And I said, what are you talking about? She says, where'd you go? You weren't here last night. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I got up to go to the bathroom. I said, what time? She said, around 3:15. And I looked in your room. Our rooms are right next to each other. And I didn't see you. She said, the covers were pulled back neatly. And she said, you were not in the room. I looked in the apartment and you weren't here. I said, baby, I would never leave you in the house by yourself like that. She said, Daddy, I'm telling you, you weren't here. She said, the only thing I noticed was that there was the full moon light that was shining in your room and in the living room. And I said to her, baby, there was no full moon last night.
Wow.
So she said, did your friends come and get you? I said, I don't know, babe, I don't know. I do know that I would not have left you here.
Yeah.
And so why would my daughter lie to me?
Yeah.
So there's some very strange things that happen, brother. I have no recollection of leaving this house. But my daughter said, you weren't here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And to have that witness, that family witness there, that, like you said, that was a stealing moment for her as well.
Well, she's seen them. She has talked about them, seeing them, but I don't want to get into that because that's her life at 15. But my daughter told me about past lives that she had when I was with her when she was 4.
Yeah, even my son right now, I got no problem with him coming and sleeping with us in the middle of the night, things like that. But he talks regularly about the yellow ghosts in his room that talk to him.
Yes.
And I will not discount anything. I just talk with him about it.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And then that's the gift that keeps on giving. Yeah. That's the gift that keeps on giving because they'll always trust you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll always trust you.
I think that we are all too often, any of us, ready to dismiss somebody's experience. And we need
if it doesn't fit our paradigm,
yeah, and we need to remember, those experiences happen to people, and they aren't always good. Like you said earlier, they aren't always happy ones. And we can't deny that. We can't deny the fact that these things have happened. So I want to thank you.
That something's happened. I look at early Christianity, and what would make people who would cower at the might of the Roman Empire, who would, just try to go along to get along, and, we're an occupied country, and then they meet this man, Jesus. And yes, some of the stories may be distorted or whatever, I don't know. But the next thing you know, these people are willing to go to their death with lions, or go. Something shifted, something powerful happened to have these people not fear death, who say, there's nothing you can do, nothing you can take from me. So, and I'm not saying we know. We can, for those who believe, we can always surmise. But something transformed these people, that they put that fear behind them.
Yeah.
Something transformed them. And you can have, like you said, because I tell people, brother, whether it's an NDE, whether it's an OBE, maybe it's running in nature, jogging. I know someone who had a mystical experience just jogging.
Yeah.
Didn't have anything to do with extraterrestrials. But he said, I felt a oneness. It was early in the morning, jogging in San Francisco. No one was out but me. The sun was coming up. I mean, so, there are people who are deeply spiritual people who have never had any of those experiences.
Yeah.
It's just something. You don't need to have one of these experiences to make you special or anything like that. It can help, but it's just a transformational experience.
Yeah.
And you have to, and it changes the way you live. It changes the way you treat your neighbor. It changes the way you look at life. It makes you go with the opposite of science. Believe. If you show me, I'll believe.
Yeah.
But it makes you go from that to, if you believe,
you will be shown.
Yeah.
And before we let you go, the last question I have for you is, and of course, we can't, as we were saying, even to try to quantify or qualify these, only other way, lack of no better term, paranormal, that's by literal definition, something out of the norm. These paranormal experiences that I've had, my brush with the divine. You've had your brush not only with the divine, but with the extraterrestrial.
Which is a divinity in itself.
Yes, absolutely. And we can't necessarily quantify these things to someone who hasn't had them, but to those who have had them, what can they do to start beginning to process them, Michael? What can they do to start? Because like we said earlier, when these revelations come to the world, when this stuff happens, it's going to be world shaking. The confidence of so many people in the world is going to be utterly shaken to the ground. And that is even people of faith, folks.
Yes.
What can people do to start processing this when it happens to them?
I think the first thing that they can do is to just make sure they're around people or someone that is not going to judge them, that will just listen. Because just talking about it is, and it depends on what actually happened. If it was traumatic, either way, you want to be able to talk to someone. But I think that's key, because all of the healing starts when you can communicate it and not be ridiculed. And they can call me. I put 2 or 3 people in initiation, but you may not. You just someone. It could be a friend. They don't have to be a trained individual.
Yeah.
But just someone that's going to say, "Look, I don't know. It didn't happen to me, but I'm here for you. Tell me. Get it off your chest." That's number 1. Number 2, I think, would be to if you can find a support group or find a professional, that helps. Those 2 things help. The other thing is to read up. There's just a lot of literature out here on people who've had those experiences. Yeah. Read up on it so you're not the only person it's happening to, because it can feel very alone. You can feel very alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I did. And it helped me integrate it. I think I had more choices in my area when I was living in New York. There were mental health professionals who dealt with experiencers. But even if you can just go to someone that can trust, call me.
Yeah.
Email me.
And I'm here to tell you, folks, you may be like, yeah, whatever. Personal testimony right here. I actively have a friend that contacted me after one of our last shows that was like, how do I get a hold of Michael? She tunes into my show every once in a while, things like that, but she reached out to you and she got back to me afterward. It was like, thank you so much for connecting me with him.
Oh, yes. So we talked. That's right.
Yeah. And I was just happy to have been somebody who helped build that bridge for someone to make that connection.
Well, see, that's what your show does. That's what your show does. Yeah. That's what your show does, Christopher. And that's what shows like yours do. And you're in the right place at the right time. Yeah. And you're going to get more of that as we move forward.
Well, and same with you as well. Let everybody know where they can go, of course, other than the dudes and beer. Wow. That is just such a knee-jerk reaction after almost 7 years. The Curious Realm store, other than the Curious Realm store to go get your books, where they can go to get your books, they can go to contact you for personal energy healing sessions, personal teaching, things like that. Shameless self-promotion time.
They can call me at, they can email me at Michael JS Carter at gmail.com. I just got a new website literally 3 days ago. It's real modest. Go to michaeljscarter.com.
Awesome.
michaeljscarter.com. And you can get my books on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. If you go to my website, or you can email me and we can set up a virtual counseling session. We can set up something Reiki. I can send it at a distance. Just very reasonable rates. Just reach out and we'll work it out from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for your time. I can always tell whenever I've had a good session with somebody because my fingertips tingle.
Wow.
And boy, howdy, they are tingling today. The conversations that we have, are just always so energizing to me, Michael.
And we will continue the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. We will continue to have conversations. Speaking of which, please do hold the line while we close things out, Michael. Thank you once again for all of your time, as always. While you are online, folks, checking out everything from Michael JS Carter at michaeljscarter.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. CuriousRealm.com/store will take you to the store with all of the goodies there. And also, don't forget, we got our guest books back, everybody. There was just a huge update to WordPress, things like that. There were apparently some major issues with Amazon stores and WordPress, and we were one of the victims for a long time. But we have all of our guest books back, so stop on by, check that out, CuriousRealm.com/store, CuriousRealm.com/live for all of the live episodes every week, as well as our live upcoming broadcasts from events like the Mineola Bigfoot Festival. and more coming up. Stop on by and check that out right there at curiousrealm.com/live. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, curiousrealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Curious Realm is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great content or to become a sponsor of Curious Realm or other podcasts, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. And remember, the other side is always watching.